Hello everyone. Sorry about that. I'm just making sure my mic it was folded into the inside of my rather fetching green smock, and you wouldn't have been able to hear anything at all. I think apart from that, wouldn't be very useful at all. But hello, nice to see you. And here's the man, Cindy. Yeah. You're all so far ahead of me, I don't even have to ask you now if you can see and hear me okay. Everybody knows to check, to let me know. That's brilliant. There's noise. Error message from Julie. Just get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, make sure everyone can see and hear. It's good for Renee. Julie's got an error. It's good for Cindy. Is it all right for you, Olaf? You should, hopefully, you should all be able to see and hear me okay. And I'm streaming in 720p. So if you have a look on your YouTube video, right down the bottom, how am I going to describe this to you? Like down there is a little gear symbol, and if you bring that up, you can change the quality. It might default to 340 or something like that, depending on the speed of your internet connection, but you can bring it up quite a long way from there. I'm streaming. Ooh, my sound is a bit high. We don't want any distortion. Okay, is that better? I'm streaming at 720p. So to get the best quality, you should set it up to 720p. Cindy says, when is the November web lecture? Oh, you know what? Usually I do the blogging one first, don't I? And the studio skills second. I appear to have got my my live stream switched over this month. I think it's because I'm so excited about painting at the moment, and I've been doing a lot of studies. So I naturally started thinking, right, Threads live stream, great, I'm going to do colour mixing, reds and oranges. Sorry about that, I've just realised. Cindy, you're absolutely right. So they will be swapped around. So probably in the email I said that the blogging lecture was going to be today, the blogging stream was going to be today, and the studio skills one was going to be in a week's time. They're going to be reversed. So next week on Wednesday will be the blogging one. Sorry about that. Julie's got it. It looks like it's working nicely for everybody. Okay. So today we're carrying on with colour mixing, and I'm going into the oranges. And this is something, an area I think after yellows where people struggle with a lot. And all I want to show you today is how I go about mixing accurate colours for light and shadow in the oranges. And I have a number of studies I want to paint for you, so I'm going to try and get them done fairly quickly without doing too much detail. Firstly, here behind me, my lovely assistant here is a 5YR. What is it? It's a 5YR value 6, chroma 14, orange sphere. This is actually higher chroma than your average orange. And it's the highest chroma that you can get in a middle orange. The Munsell middle orange is slightly to the yellow side in hue terms of most of our hue paints. Now let me go straight over to the palette because I don't want to hang around today because there's quite a lot I want to get through. Hopefully you can see that okay. Slightly blown out, but I'm going to switch one of the lights off in a minute. And it will all start to make more sense. So today we are all around here. So a really good place to start with sorting out this stuff is knowing what hue all of your tube paints are. It's a really important part of being able to mix. I don't mean what value, I don't mean what chroma, I just mean what hue they are. So what I've got here is all of my yellows and reds. And if you're anything like me, you probably have, sorry, all of my oranges and reds, you probably have quite a few of these, okay? There's a lot of overlap between these. I've got Naphthol red here, which is a very, very high chroma, slightly orangey red. And I've also got Cad Red Light, which is about the same value, almost the same hue, just lower chroma. What's the point in having these? There's no point at all. Get rid of that one. This one's great. And I've got an ordinary Winder & Newton Cad Red, which is, in hue terms, is going slightly more around this way, towards red. And then I've got my Quinacridone Rose, which is coming around here. Not quite round towards magenta, but not far off. Or red-purple in Munsell terms. It's about here in terms of hue. Useful, especially for mixing with Naphthol red for the shadow side of red roses and apples, where you need to try and get as much chroma as you can at a low value. So moving around to my oranges, this is transparent red oxide. I don't actually use this very much, although I've just started playing with it again a little bit because of the handling qualities of it and because of the transparency. And this is a red orange, so it's about here. Burnt sienna. You can probably see there is slightly more yellow than this one, so it's a bit further around here. Right, so if we were going from our blue reds round to our oranges, would probably be something like that one and then that one. This is permanent orange, which is quite similar to a Cad orange, although higher chroma. I don't bother with Cad orange. If I've got permanent orange, I don't need Cad orange. That is quite a red orange, surprisingly. And this is yellow ochre. Now we call it a yellow, but it's actually a yellow orange. It's slightly round this way from orange. It's lower chroma and a mid value. Now burnt umber, this is a red orange, okay, so that's round here. And raw umber, which is a yellow orange, which is slightly round here. And it's really useful to know the hues of these paints because that will let you know what you need to use in a mix depending on which way you want to send the colour you've got. Now the way I think about colour mixing is, I was just teaching a workshop. Julie was there a week or two back, and I'm keen on the idea of what I call taking a colour on a journey, and I want to see the steps. When I teach a workshop, I want to see the steps that people have taken, that their colour has taken on the palette. So we start off with something which is fairly close to what we want, and then we see where we need to move it. First we get it to the right value, and then we see where we need to move it. But I'm going to go straight in now with what is really, let's get a bit of terps in there. Now I'm at home in my own studio, I can use my terps again. Although those of you who worry about this stuff will be happy to know I've got some Gamsol too, and I've started playing with that. I'll explain why actually a little bit later. Why I've got transparent red oxide out and why I've been experimenting with Gamsol. I'm embarking on a new area of learning, and I'll share that with you shortly towards the end of the webinar. So this colour here exactly matches this Munsell chip here, which also exactly matches the local colour of the sphere which I've got in my shadow box, okay? But I want to know what the light and shadow colours are. Now, after a lot of practice, let me just check everything's still okay. Thank you, Julie. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Your painting will be on its way to you very soon. What usually happens, this chip goes here. So I know in this case, this is why the big book or the small Munsell book as well is so useful for studying light and shadow and colour. So I know the local colour of my sphere is here. It's completely at the extremes of the chroma that you can reach with paint. I know from experience that the shadow colour is going to be down here somewhere. And this is a middle orange, okay? And what happens quite often in interior light is that this will pull slightly towards yellow. The oranges tend to pull slightly towards yellow in the shadows. So I'm probably going to want a mix between burnt umber and raw umber down there. Possibly I might use some transparent red oxide and then swing it round towards yellow. And as I go up into the highlights, I'm going to be up here. The halftone is going to be somewhere around here. Now, people say quite often, let me show you, this is rather blown out. Hang on, let me switch the secondary lights off, and that would be easier to see, I think. That should hopefully be a bit easier to see. I've got to get it's a difficult balance between having the right light on me when I'm speaking so you can actually see me, and then having the right light on the subject. So that's a bit easier. This is a bit truer colour now, I think. So my lights are going to be around here. My shadow is going to be down here. Just before I hit the halftone, I'm going to be around here. My lightest light is going to be here. But the difficult thing is it's probably going to be slightly higher chroma than that. And that's the highest chroma I can get in paint. And the reason for that is as the light hits the sphere more directly, there is more light and therefore more colour. The halftone will be around here. Now, people will often tell you, and I've heard this time and again, that the halftone is the highest chroma. And it's a physical impossibility on this sphere for the halftone to be a higher chroma. And having studied, I must say, quite a lot of spheres over the last few years and painted them as exactly as I possibly can, I've found that the halftone actually is not the lightest part of the sphere. The center light is the lightest, sorry, not the lightest, the highest chroma part of the sphere. But let's get on with some painting, okay? So I have got, switch to the main camera. Hopefully that's going to be light enough to see, so you can see a little bit here. Obviously this is the camera's angle, so it's slightly to the side, but you can see in rough terms I've got, this is my light area, this is my shadow area, and in between I've got a halftone. And I think even there you can see that the highest chroma is here, where it's pointing straightest to the light. And then I've got my highlight here. Cast shadows on my background. So I'm going to try and replicate that over here fairly quickly. Okay. And I'm going to show you, as I go, what I'm doing on the palette at the same time. So you can see the study that I'm painting. You can see my palette here. And you can see my subject over here. I'm actually looking at it a little bit from this way, so I can see a little bit more shadow than you, but that's basically the same thing that I can see. We can both see pretty much the same thing. Does that all sound good? Does that all make sense? No problem, Marilyn. And Romy, no problem at all. Better late than never, and that is absolutely true. So I'm going to start whizzing straight into this now. So you will have seen me use one of these quite a lot before, which is simply a piece of paper with a hole in. It's a color checker, and it allows you to isolate the colors and to see, as long as you hold it either consistently parallel or parallel to the surface of your panel, you can move it around in front of your subject and you can isolate bits of color and find out exactly what they are, and you can mix them, or you can do it using, if you happen to have the big book, you can use the big book. So I can get the local, which is this color here, the local chip, and I can hold this so I can just see a little bit, a little hole through it, and I can scan across. I could do with another camera on the subject ready for this, but I can scan across and I can see which bit exactly matches it. And the closest to it is just around this bit here, just before I hit the highlight. And over here is higher value and it's higher chroma, and I know I pretty much can't reach that, okay? So if I get my next highest value chip out, I'm running out of hands. I also need 3 hands as well as another camera. And this is the higher one, and I hold that over here. I can see that that's very close to the very lightest part, which is around here of the sphere. So I want to mix that. And let's get a good idea of what the shadow colour is going to be. Now I'm saying to you, I think it's probably going to be around here, so probably somewhere between these two. So let's grab this one and see. One of the problems I often find is being able to hit the chroma, even if you've got the value. So this one is actually quite a close match for the reflected light area, which is down here. You see you've got your core shadow here, which is the darkest part of the shadow, and then there's light coming down and bouncing off here, up into the shadow. And there's an area of reflected light there, and that's quite close to the reflected light. So let's bung that one out as well, because I'm probably going to want that one. But you can actually, if you get these colours pretty close, you can paint a really convincing sphere this way. So the core shadow is probably going to be, in terms of value, it's right down here, except that it's slightly higher chroma. It's slightly higher chroma than this chip, but the chip that I've got here is this one. And at that value, that's the highest chroma that I can get in paint. You know, the Munsell book is matched, it basically tells you what you can do in paint. So I really want a chroma, I want that value, but I want a chroma about there. So my choice is to accept a lower chroma or to push up the value and change the values a little bit. So we'll see how we go. So that is going to be, you can't really see these on the palette, can you? I'm going to move the palette a little bit up. Just bear with me 2 seconds, because I want you to be able to see the little, actually let's stick them, I'll bung them right on the palette. That will save time. There's my light. There's the local colour, which is only one area. That's the reflected light. And that's the core shadow. And they're all from the same page of the Munsell book, right? Actually, the hue of this does swing very slightly towards yellow, but not much. So what I'm doing, you'll hear illustrators talk about this a lot. It's called holding the local, so that you make sure that you keep the hue the same right the way through the light and the shadow, or you keep it fairly consistent. Another way of painting is not to worry about that at all, not to worry about keeping the hue consistent. It's a very different school. It's one I'm beginning to investigate at the moment. A lot of it comes from plein air painting, and they are quite often a lot more free and easy with the hue. But what we're doing here is understanding what actually happens in indoor light, not exterior light, where you tend to get a lot more influences, especially if it's a sunny day, of sun and blue reflection from the sky. We're finding out what the standard is, if you like. So I want this colour here. Now this one that I've mixed is the local, so obviously that's going to be, it's too low in value, so I want to be up a bit from there. The only thing that I can do to get up from there really is to bring in more yellow, but that's also going to swing. It's also going to swing the hue, right? But if I am very careful, I may be able to compromise and get the slightly higher value, and the hue will be very slightly out, but very close. This one here, this colour for the local, this is permanent orange and this is cad yellow, right? Although you will hear me say this a lot as you get used to watching me colour mix. It doesn't matter what tube paints you use. What matters is that you reach your target. So you may not have these exact paints. You may not be able to reach these chromas, but you'll be able to get close. It's slightly too yellow, but only very slightly, and it's got the chroma and it's got the value. Maybe I can bring the value down a touch, which will swing the hue back. Give me a little bit more chroma. The hue will be closer. Yeah, actually that's good. I've very slightly beaten the chroma, but the value is slightly low as well. So that's my lightest colour there. For my half tone, I've got to think about what I could use to reach these. I want maximum chroma. I'm not going to use, I think I'm not going to use transparent red oxide, this one here, which would probably give me slightly more chroma. but it doesn't cover well. My two choices for the closest paints to these are these two, Burnt Sienna and TRO, Transparent Red Oxide. Burnt Sienna is opaque, slightly lower chroma, and this is also more red-orange. Let me put it out and you'll be able to see, hopefully, on the palette the difference between them. The TRO is a lot darker too. But let's have a look. You see, that is quite a lot darker, really, than that one there. So I could take some TRO and swing the hue and bring the value up, because I need to do both of those things at once. But you notice that I'm not doing any complement mixing or anything like that here. I'm at the extreme reaches of chroma. I can't afford to compromise. If I bring anything else into these colours apart from very high chroma, oranges and reds and yellows, then I'm going to be in real trouble for the chroma. I'm just not going to be able to hit it. The amount of times you find yourself in a position where you have to hit these chromas is probably not all that often. That's gone too high. Bring it back down. But I think my hue is going to be much too red. And that's the opposite of the way it would go. So the chroma is higher, the value is right, but the hue is too red, so I have to make it more yellow. The only way I can do that down at this value to swing it more yellow, all I have is raw umber. Now, obviously raw umber is very low chroma. So if I bring that up to about the right value with cad yellow, I can't avoid dropping the chroma. Do you see what's happening here? I'm going to mix this in. This is about the right value, a bit darker than that. I'm going to swing the hue around a little bit because I have to, and when I do that, by mixing these together, when I do that, I'm going to lose chroma. It's unavoidable because this is a lower chroma mix, this one on the right. Not completely mixed in. And you may wonder, and I hear people criticizing this approach of obsessively matching colours. I've gone a bit too far to yellow. But the reason this is useful is it teaches you so much about the way that colour reacts to light as it moves across a form, which then informs your painting. And you can invent more freely if you want to, perhaps for compositional purposes. Just check everything's all okay. Judy, hello. Good to see you. Holding the local, yeah. Isn't this the essence of your method? Yes, this is the essence. This is the essence of it. So I've pretty much got that colour nailed there, so I'll pop that there. That's my reflected light. I've left a gap here for my halftone, because if I've got these right, I won't need to mix a separate colour for my halftone. I'll be fine. So right down into the core shadow. This is actually the TRO is a really good match, except that it's too red, but it has slightly more chroma. So, but it's the right value. I'd forgotten what a low value TRO is actually. So if I want to swing that to be more yellow, which I'm going to need to do if it's going to work. The only thing I've got, the only yellow available to us down at that value range is, again, raw umber brought up to the right value with yellow. It's low chroma because there's more raw umber in it, but I can't do anything about it. I have to lose the chroma if I want the hue. Or I could keep the chroma and have the hue be slightly wrong. These are choices that you can make and play with and see what you like, where your compromise is. I'm going to compromise somewhere in between, in the middle. That's about right. So I'm going to use something like that for my core shadow, okay? But I also need background value. I'm going to start by, let's get all these paints out of the way. I'm going to start by roughing in the general shape. This is going to be, I would say, a kind of fairly quick and dirty painting today, because all I want to show you is these colours working against each other, not spend forever painting a perfect sphere. So all I want to do to begin with is rough out a sphere. It doesn't really matter if it's perfect, but I would prefer if it's at least vaguely spherical. I'm using a pretty big brush, you know, because I don't want to be getting too into the perfection of the drawing and stuff like that. What I really want to do is to be demonstrating colours and colour mixing to you. Okay, reasonable sphere, and I'm going to just state briefly where the core shadow is coming around about here, and it comes around into the reflected light there. So I'm going to put some background in quickly, and for that, what should we use? I've got some new Rosemary's brushes. This is an ivory, long, flat. What's the value at the back there? Let's have a quick check. I think it's probably about, yeah, it's a mid value about here, value 5 about there. I'm not going to bother about these being particularly perfect values. I just want something. I want a foil really for my sphere. So we can see the colours working, because if we see the colours against the white, they look entirely wrong. They will look entirely wrong. There's a bit light around here. There's a cast shadow area. I'm just going to be banging this in really fast, really. Making a quick rough value scale here. Around here it starts to go darker. Until by the time I get round here, the value has dropped right down. This is from my viewpoint, which is probably, it will probably look slightly different from to what you see. So the value of the ground is higher. I'm not going to bother with the hue. I'm just going to put that in quickly. I've got my cast shadow is going to come here. I'm just throwing in a bit of terps to help it move. Needs to be lighter still. Again, I'm not too bothered about the exact value here, as long as I've got something that will work visually enough to see the colours of the sphere, which is the bit that I'm really interested in. Need a bit more raw umber. This is for my cast shadow. I'm going to have the occlusion shadow right underneath, which is the deepest, sharpest part of the shadow. then from there it softens and lightens as it goes back. So when I want to start bunging these colours in, I'm going to start by putting in the core shadow. And that's coming around here. And I always think, even with quick studies like this, by the time you get to the point where you start, if you do the background first, by the time you get to the point where you're beginning to put in the shadow, and if you have a cast shadow, then you will immediately start to get a feeling of light and form. So that's my core shadow, reflected light. Now remember, that's light coming down here, bouncing, the surface here, and bouncing up into the shadow, so it's slightly higher value than the core shadow. When it comes right down here, I'm going to need to bring it up from there. It will be as light as the half tone. Neaten that up a bit. So my half tone colour is going to be somewhere between, this is my local, so that's that colour there, and this is my reflected light, so it's going to be somewhere between the two. So I can safely mix between these and still hold the local. I won't be shifting hue. Whereas if I was using a lot of different colours and mixing and trying to get it, then I would definitely be losing hue there. Losing the hue, the hue would be changing. And that's going to come up a little way into the reflected light. The value raises a bit there. And I'm going to hit my local, which I checked a little while ago. I'm going to hit the local just around here. Now hopefully you know what I mean by the local. It's the colour that the sphere is painted. It's the colour something is independent of light and shadow. And as it moves away from us, it goes slightly down in value too. As this edge bends away, it comes down slightly in value. These are just observations you can make yourself by getting hold of spheres and practicing with them. And then I'm going to use this, which is about the right value, and it's the highest chroma I can get for the whole of the light. I can't get any higher chroma than that. If I want higher chroma, there's basically nowhere I can go. That is the highest chroma that I can reach with paint at this hue, at this value. And it's a chroma 12, which is, I mean, the highest you can get. You might get up to 15 with some colours if you're lucky, 14, 15. But 12 is high chroma, it's bright. Okay, so you can hopefully see that it's starting to form. And then my highlight, I won't go in with straight white because it's usually slightly affected by other things, and in this case by the local. And the chroma does drop there. And that goes to show, hopefully, that if you mix these colours like even reasonably carefully, you know, and I've done almost no modelling here. I've pretty much just banged them in. You can get a fairly convincing impression of light and shadow pretty quickly if your colours are good. I just want to soften this edge. I think I want a bit of a higher value in the reflected light down here. I think more light this is just last adjustments, looking at the sphere itself and thinking about what I might want to change. I think there's probably a little bit more reflected light down there. Lost too much chroma. Lost too much value and chroma here. Yeah. I can't help fiddling with them a little bit. I've actually demonstrated what I wanted to demonstrate, but I've got like a little lump here. Can you see? It's like there's a little lump in the sphere, which is annoying the hell out of me, which I find it really hard not to spend the time to model out, if you know what I mean. And I've got a very slight swaying effect, slight glare on the paint there. Okay, really quick, high chroma orange sphere. So all I've done really is, in very simple terms, is I've picked from here, from this page of the Munsell book, and I've just gone around like that. And this halftone is actually, the value is quite a bit lower, the chroma, sorry, is quite a bit lower. People talk about the bump in the halftone. Well, I have to tell you, I've painted a lot of spheres and I've yet to see a bump. I've yet to see that the highest area of chroma is here. And it makes sense, really, when you think about it, because the highest chroma would be where there is the most light, which is around here, you know. What people tend to say is that the chroma gets blown out here by too much light, and I suspect that might be, I'm not sure, but I suspect people might say that because they work from photographs a lot, and that does happen, you know. So let's say, let me put the other lights back on for a second, and I'll come back on the camera. So that was fairly quick and dirty, okay? Just kind of banging it in. Hopefully you can see me all right. It's always a little bit dodgy when I change from one lighting situation to another. Yeah, I mean, it's I doubt if it's absolutely perfect, but it's very, very close. And it's very simple if you understand the colors that you're mixing and you know what you need to get there. But the really useful point, I think, to come out of this is, as I was saying when I was mixing the yellows, when you move from light to shadow, you can't use the same tube pigments. You need to change. So in my light, for this one, on the light side, I was using permanent orange and cad yellow, and then I had to swing the hue a little bit further around, so I used towards yellow, so I used yellow ochre, which is a yellow orange, okay? As I went into the halftone, I was using transparent red oxide and yellow and raw umber, and similarly when I went right down into the shadow, I was using the same, but in a slightly different mix. But you can see how you need to use different tube paints as you move across the form, okay? I want to do another quick sphere for you now. This is, for anyone who paints portraits, this is really interesting, okay? Where's my page? The local of this sphere is value 6, chroma 4. Looks really low, almost grayish, right? But this color here is pretty much a fair average of most Caucasian skin tones. Mine is very close to this, can you see that? But I'm slightly more red, genetic I suppose. Some people are slightly more yellow, but we tend to be within a page or two of the Munsell book, okay? So this is slightly different, but the curve is the same. So if I want to paint light and shadow of this local, okay, it's the same value as this high chroma one that I just painted. But the curve is going to go like this. It will still drop down into the shadow, and the highlight will come up like this. It will lose chroma as it comes up into the lights, okay? Even though I could do it straight, it actually won't go like that. It will curve a little bit. I'll probably push the chroma a little bit in the shadow, okay? But this one here Let me put the chips back in so you can see where they go. Sorry, 2 seconds. Actually, I'm going to switch to the palette camera because it's easier for me to show this stuff on here. So this new sphere, this one here, is this local. Okay, so I've got 2 palettes showing now, which is most annoying. Let's switch that off. This local, the curve is going to be like that. For this local, which is the sphere I've just painted, the curve was extreme, okay? So this one is going to be much easier to mix exact colours for because it's not so bright. Now at this point, I've got to switch them over, which is a delicate operation because I only just painted this and it's still wet. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. I've got paint everywhere. The things you have to go through to learn about colour, it's outrageous. Just wipe that off the floor. There we go. So let me stick this one in the shadow box. So if you want to study, if you're painting portraits, right, and you want to study the effect of light and shadow across a person's face, if you're dealing with Caucasian flesh, Caucasian skin tones, then you can simply get a sphere like this and paint the light and shadow, mix the colours as I just did, and you will get really, really close. Okay, so I'm going to do this one now. Let's clean up the palette a little bit. The background values I can keep. These colours are going to go because I don't need them. I'll keep that one because that might end up being useful. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. This is, if you want to study light and shadow at the average, you know, of flesh, skin tones, this is a really, really good exercise for it. There are, of course, variations. Ears, hands, knuckles go more red, noses and cheeks. There are variations, but if you get this right, if you can paint a sphere like this really well, it will give you an anchor point and you won't wander too far, and you won't end up going into too high chroma, which is what people do an awful lot with skin tones. So I'm going to guess, like, you know, this is my local. So my light is going to be somewhere like that. Keeping it, it's probably going to be between these two. So I actually have a possibility here that I can raise the chroma slightly. My half tone is going to be about here, and my shadow is going to be, it's going to be here or here, right near the bottom. So I've got top light, center light. So reflected light, half tone will be between them, and the bottom is going to be about there. So let's have a go at mixing those. All still the same hue. No, can you imagine that studio cat? Yeah, he's actually not in the room today. I don't know where he's gone. He's popped out. He's popped out somewhere. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to start by mixing these colours. Now, I'm going to find, if I can use these colours, these very high chroma colours here to mix these, but it's like you getting in a Ferrari to go down the shops. You know, I don't really need to. And what I will probably find is that if I take I'm going to go for the local first, which is this colour here. It's slightly dirty, that chip. If I take, for sake of argument, let's just take burnt sienna, okay? And I'll bring it up to the value that I want with white. It's going to be more red because burnt sienna is a red orange, right? Remember, and we want a more yellow orange. But it's not a million miles away, you know. I'm aiming for this chip here. Let's bring it up to the right value first. You'll hear me, if you ever do a colour mixing workshop with me, you'll hear me go on about this all the time. The first thing we do is we pick a tube paint that we think is somewhere near in terms of hue, and preferably higher chroma, because it's much easier to add chroma than to lose it. Sorry, much easier to lose it than to add it. So you want to be slightly high chroma, and then bring it to the value. That's too light. Bring it to the value that you want. Value is pretty good, but it's too red. So I need to swing it more yellow. Yellow ochre is a really good choice because it's not too high chroma. I could use cad yellow, but I would be putting a lot of chroma that I would then need to drop later. So let's bring this up to the same value. So I've got a red orange and a yellow orange of the same value. I'm doing this maybe a little faster than I usually would. If I was demonstrating, because I'm excited by I've got a couple more I want to do. Yeah, value is good. So this one's too yellow, this one's too red. So if I mix them together, I should end up in a happy place. The chroma is too high. I can see that immediately. More yellow. Maybe not. The chroma is way too high, but the hue looks quite good and the value is good. So I want to drop the chroma. The best way to drop chroma is with a lower chroma version of the same color. So this is a yellow orange. So if I take raw umber and bring it up to the same value, this is the crucial bit, I have to bring it up to the same value with white. I can drop the chroma with this without affecting the hue over much. It's a yellow orange raw umber. Still too dark. You can do all of this, by the way, the knowledge is conceptual, so you can do all of this without a Munsell big book. You can do it with a student book, or you can do it with no Munsell book at all. It's, as long as you have the concepts. And the value is pretty close. So if I take that, leave a bit back in case I overshoot, bring in some of this, bring the chroma down, swinging it yellow, bring some more red back in. More red. Might have been better off using burnt umber there. Yeah, I'm a little bit yellow. Let me clean off that chip so I can put a dab on it, it's easier to see. Bit yellow still. That's burnt sienna out again. So I'm kind of balancing because this colour here is dropping the chroma nicely. Let's try bringing that more red actually, because I still need to drop the chroma further. It'll go more reddish orange now, because that was burnt umber I just put in there. Bring it up to the same value. That definitely would have been a better choice. Is the value good? No, it's too low. We were joking in the workshop that I just did about how much paint I go through without actually painting. Even if you know, I'm a big advocate of just colour mixing for its own sake. And you've just got to get used to the fact that I think it's the cost of learning, you know, is going through quite a lot of paint. I'm just making sure I bring this up to the right value, because if I mix it in and it's the wrong value, then I start to lose the colour completely. This might actually do it, because it's going to drop chroma and it's going to swing it towards red slightly. Yeah, near as damn it is to swearing. I'm going to go with that as being pretty good. So that's my local. So a lighter version, a slightly higher chroma and higher value. Now this is probably not that high chroma. I think if I bring in some of this is my orange. I want it to be more yellow. And if I bring in a little bit of that, it's going to bring the chroma right up and value a bit. And if I bring in some white to the value the rest of the way, I should get really close. And I can then, the chroma's high. Is the value right yet? The value is low still. And the chroma is high. So let's go higher up with white. I can afford to lose chroma. I need to bring the value up and I can afford to lose chroma. I think I'm a bit too yellow with this one. Again. Yeah. My value is about right. The chroma is the higher one of the two, and I suspect it's not going to go that high, but it's definitely too yellow. This is more reddish. So if I bring that value up a step to the right value, a bit further. Mix between them, I should get really close. Might need a bit more red in it. Does need a bit more red. So I'm going to bring burnt sienna, which is my red, orange, up to the same value with white. But every time I do this, I'm bringing it up to the right value, you know. That's it. It's the lower value version, which I think is the lower chroma version, which I think is probably right. Give it a little bit more chroma. Slightly yellow, but it's close. It's going to do. If I was being really obsessive, I would spend a little bit longer with that. Now this one here, let's try just going burnt umber. Sorry, burnt sienna up to the right value. Gone a bit too far. This is bracketing everything I'm doing here. So I'm taking these colours on a little journey. And I'm doing it by, if I think my hue is too far one way, then I'll mix another colour of the same value with a hue which is the opposite side of my target. My value is way too high. Let's get that out of the way. Still high. Can take a while to mix sometimes like this, but it's worth it for what happens when you get it right. And then one on the other side, a more yellow. Now that is too high value yellow ochre out of the tube, so I'll bring it down with raw umber to the right value, which is going to work pretty well for me, I think, because I need to drop the chroma slightly too. So I'm bracketing here. I'm going to step my colour round the hue wheel a little bit and drop the chroma at the same time. So somewhere between the two should be about right for that one. Pretty good. The value is slightly high. Drop the value a little bit, but that's pretty good for my reflected light. And for my core shadow, I'm going to go with, again, with TRO, raw umber, brought up to the right value with, let's bring it up with yellow ochre. Rather than cad yellow, because I don't think I need to keep as much chroma this time. And cad yellow is obviously a much higher chroma yellow than yellow ochre. Yeah, that should do pretty nicely for my core shadow. Palette is getting slightly confused, but hopefully you can see I've got my reflected light and my core shadow. I've got my local and I've got a highlight. A little bit worried about that actually. I think that might need to go slightly higher chroma and more orange. Better. So back to the study. I'll do the same thing with my values. Let's rough out the sphere first in the same way. Need to knock my other lights out now so that we can see the subject a bit better. And do this one here. I'm not working exactly site size, although this is a smaller sphere. I don't really mind. It's mostly conceptual, so I just want to make sure that it's roughly sphere shaped. My core shadow is similar. It's going to come down like this. Then it goes into the reflected light here. Get my background values in. And these are not that crucial really, that they're exact, as long as they're reasonably good. They're really just so that we're not painting against that flat white background, which would look pretty horrible. It's almost impossible to judge colours against a very bright background like that. Pop in my occlusion shadow, and I'm bringing a little bit of burnt umber in for my occlusion shadow. The occlusion shadow is the same, because for a cast shadow, which the occlusion shadow is part of, that is determined by the value and the hue of the surface it's cast onto, not of the object casting it. So it belongs to this ground. So it will be pretty much the same. I can see a bit more behind it because I've got a smaller sphere here. It will basically be the same. The light, by the way, that I'm using here is what they call form light, so it's coming down slightly in front of the shadow box and above. Don't need to spend a lot of time over this, I just need something in there that will work. Just rough values are fine. Okay, here goes nothing. I'm going to get a fresh brush out, because if I use one of the brushes that I've already used, there's a really good chance that I will end up with a much higher chroma color than I really want. So I'll start with my core shadow. So seriously, I mean, if you're really wondering about, I mean, I know that people do wonder about the color of shadows in portraits. This seems like such an obvious exercise to do, but this will show you what they are. It doesn't mean that you have to paint them exactly this, but it's always going to help you if you know what they are. If you know what they really are, you're not going to come up with something which is wildly out. And if you decide to do something slightly different, it will be because you've chosen it. So this is my reflected light. Slightly higher value, because again, I've got light coming down here and bouncing up into the core shadow, but it's the same hue. Now I have here very controlled light environment, of course. I've got a color corrected bulb of the temperature about 5400, about daylight. I've got my sphere in the shadow box. So there's very little influence on it from anything else apart from the light which is on it. If you're painting something that you've just set up on a table, or if you're outside, it will be different. So my halftone is going to be somewhere in between these two. So I'm painting it the same way, I'm just using lower chroma colors. The values are the same, because the sphere is the same local value, it's just a different chroma. It's the same hue. This will be softer shadow, softer edge, sorry. Local color, I'm going to hit about the same place. I'm not bothering to judge this one either, because I've done this one, so conceptually it ought to be the same. Come into my local about here. They'll always look like Maltesers, I think, these spheres of this value. As the form turns away from me, it's going to be slightly lower value, so I'll bring my local in here. And even before we've finished it, there's the beginnings of a feeling of form. I'll bring my general light in. I quite often paint this bit a bit thicker. So this is higher value than the local and slightly higher chroma, because there is more light falling on it. You can, if you doubt this, you can use this method to check it for yourself. Let's bring a bit more of that in. I think I want a little bit more chroma there. Maybe overdid it. I'm actually not looking. I'm not looking at the sphere very much because I pretty much know what's going to happen here. You can, if you've done a bunch of these, you get to a point where you can actually paint them without having a reference, without having anything to look at, and the colours will be really convincing. Obviously, I can see more core shadow than you can. And this one is, it hasn't been. It's interesting that there is a very subtle highlight because it hasn't been freshly painted. It's dry paint. I painted this a long time ago, so it's not as shiny. So that I am going to do as it is. I'm not going to put in dead white. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit, okay? Because it has a much more satin finish. I'm feeling I want to bring the value up around here a little bit. And I think I've overstated the chroma, so bringing in some white is no bad thing there. I'm doing a little bit of mixing on the study itself. But basically, if you were painting a bit more reflected light, you need to be really careful of the value of reflected light. It's very easy to overstate it. Destroys the form. You can overstate the chroma, and get away with it, but overstating the reflected light, the value of the reflected light is usually a pretty bad idea. The shape of this one is a bit dodgier. I haven't done such a good job of drawing this one out. It looks more like someone sat on the top of it and squished it down. This area will usually be soft. So a slightly squashed 5YR6, value 6, chroma 4 sphere. Turn it away from the light a little there. Making slight adjustments just to bring the chroma up a little bit around there. I think the more I bring the chroma up and take this a little more red, the closer it's getting. If it had been freshly painted, then the highlight would just be more obvious like that, and it would be a slightly more shiny surface. As simple as that. So that's pretty much that. You will find that those are the colors. I think my core shadow chroma may be slightly high. It looks a little bit like there's some reflected light in it. I think it's too high, but I can knock it back. Pretty much the same value, but knock back the chroma a little bit. I think that's going to look a bit more convincing. A bit too much chroma in there. Chroma does drop off in the shadows. A bit more halftone in there. Just soften that. Transition a bit. Yeah, I think we're getting closer. And you can fiddle with them endlessly. Once you get them close enough, you can fiddle with them endlessly until you feel you've got it exactly right. Okay. Oh, dropping my glasses. So the same thing, just the same hue, same value, just a slightly different chroma. And this is why I say that we're all orange. This is titanium white I'm using, Olaf. Paint like a rich man, definitely, Judy. I completely agree. Definitely. Okay, so I'm going to do one more for you now very quickly. Do you want me to do another one? Do you want me to stop now? We've been going for about an hour and a quarter. You let me know if you want me to stop or you want me to keep going, because I've got another idea. We have a choice for what to do next. I can go and do something red, orange, or this, which is, again, is the same hue. This ball is 5YR, but this is actually the local color of my wife's skin. It's most definitely not black. It is the same chroma as this one and a lower value. So I could do that one just to show you how I would model. It's almost the same, except I would model the form slightly differently, or we can do a red. You tell me which you would rather. Or if you want to stop now, if you feel that you've got enough out of that, then that's fine too. I'm quite happy to keep going for another 20 minutes or so and do one more. Red, orange. The apple, right? Another would be great. Okay, that's great. If you can stay, then I'm willing to keep going. So should we do the apple, or should we do, basically this would be like what you would call a black person's flesh tone. If you ever, you know, people often, it really annoys the hell out of me, people use blue in the shadows, reflected light when they paint black people. It's like they're really not blue. You know, you can get yourself a sphere out like this and you can find out what colors they actually are. But I can tell you what they would be just by checking them. I don't even, at this point, you ought to be able to, I should be able to ask you and you would be able to tell me too what would happen, you know. If we look at this page, I've got to clean these chips before I put them back in the book. If we look at this page of the Munsell book, but if you can mix these colors, and if you can draw well, and you can paint really convincing portraits. If you paint a lot of portraits, I would strongly advise that you get yourself a 5YR 6/4 sphere and paint it until you're blue in the face, until you're really happy with what you've done. Okay, so let me go on to the palette a second. Bye-bye, Kay. Thanks for coming. You'll be able to watch a little bit of the replay too. Okay, so someone is saying red orange, which I think means the apple, and someone else is saying dark skin tone. So I'm not sure which one you want me to do. Say apple or dark skin. And you can tell me which one you want me to do. Actually, let me check my... Oh yeah, I was panicking for a minute there that my mic had stopped working. So let me put all of these back. This sphere is actually do I need to stick the light on? Can you see that okay? I think it's good. The local of this sphere is this one here. Is it that one or is it the next one down? I think it's the next one down. 4, 4. Yeah, 4, 4. Value 4. Chroma 4. Interestingly, very, very similar to this one. Right? Which is here. Just 2 steps down in value. And that is the difference between a European and someone who comes from Jamaica. That's me and that's my wife. Kids are there. You know, maybe the chroma is slightly higher, but that's pretty much it. Dark skin. Dark skin. Okay, I'll do this one. Maybe I'll do the maybe I'll do the reds. Maybe I'll do the apple another time, which we can certainly do. I mean, I don't mind, you know, how much of this you would like me to do, because I think it's all really instructive, and moving around the hue wheel and painting objects and showing you how I would mix the colours for each of those as I go round. It just cements the knowledge, you know, a little bit further. Okay, so here we have my wife in the shadow box. And I have actually checked this with the Munsell chips. It's really, really close. Okay. That light is a bit, it's going to confuse. I've got to knock this light off now. It's going to confuse the light in the shadow. So I think you can kind of already see there, you know, the value of the core shadow is lower, the value of everything is slightly lower, you know. And when you go down the value scale with a local object, the values are closer together. The difference between the light and the shadow is less. As you go up the value scale to very light objects, I'm trying to see if I've got something I can show you. White cube, for instance, the difference between the value of the shadow side and the light side is greater. On darker objects, please say I've got a darker cube handy. I do. The difference in value between the shadow side and the lighter side is less. But obviously, because this is a light local, the shadow is lighter and so is the light, and the same for this, which is a darker local. When you get down to objects that you paint black, ivory black, there's very, very little difference at all. So let me clean up the palette quickly of these colours. Don't need these. I'm also reasonably obsessive about making sure my palette is clean before I start to mix colours for a new study or a new object. All in the same hue area though. On the workshop, I didn't want to use terps because I know some people react strongly to it. So I tried to get some Gamsol and I couldn't get any, so I got Zest It. Zest It. Don't go near it. It's absolutely horrendous. I paint with terps and Zest It made me dizzy. It smells really strongly, and I have a feeling that it's basically refined petroleum spirits. But I think they didn't refine it very much, and what they did instead was put in a really strong scent, and I actually got dizzy trying to paint with it, and it doesn't dry for ages. It's horrible. Gamsol, on the other hand, is pretty good. Me, I like terps. I like the smell of pine trees in my studio. So my local is here. So I'm going to need to mix my local. My light is going to be about here. My core shadow is going to be right down here, probably even lower value than that, which is a 2, and my halftone is going to be about there. Halftone and my core shadow is going to drop chroma would be back down there. Possibly lower value than that. This should be all I will need. This is, sorry, my reflected light. My halftone would be somewhere between the two. Let's see if I'm right. I'm just guessing. This is my local. Is it my local? Yes. So let's start by mixing the local. Now again, I know what the hue is. It's an orange, okay? I know that burnt sienna, it's easy now because all of these colours are higher chroma than these. I know that burnt sienna is too red, and I know that yellow ochre is too yellow. So between the two of those I ought to be able to get close. Let's get some more yellow ochre out. So this is the value I want. Burnt sienna. Dark. So let's bring it up to the right value first. Right. You can use lead white for these. There's no reason why you shouldn't. You actually get a nicer finish, but I find that especially for lower chroma colours, titanium is fine. That's way too light. I keep mixing this, judging this way too light, and it's interesting because I've had this experience time and again when judging values. Almost always judge them too light, and I think pretty much everybody does it. On the workshop, everybody did it. The other two workshops I've taught, everybody did it, and I do it. So this is going to be too high chroma, and it's going to be too red, but let's get it to the right value. That's the right value. So I want to drop the chroma, I want to swing it yellow. Let's see if I take chroma, very low chroma, bring it up to the right value with yellow ochre, also quite low chroma. So this should be lower chroma than my target. I'm going to bring it the rest of the way with white. Drop even more chroma. Too far. Because I need to drop the chroma of this a long way, so I'm swinging hue and dropping chroma at the same time. When I teach colour mixing, I say try to change only one at a time. In practice you can't, but it's good to try only to change one when you're getting used to this method. A lot more control. But now I'm more used to it. Actually, I'm mixing more carefully than I often do when I'm painting now. After lower chroma and more yellow, but the same value. Slightly lower still. Might have put too much chroma in. See, I'm going backwards and forwards a bit with the value here. That's about right. So somewhere between these two ought to be about right for my local. Been good, but I think the value is too low. I really recommend trying to mix this way with paint if you haven't tried it before, because it's almost like magic. You see a huge shift. It's the way you want it to be. No, the value is good, but actually it's really close, but I think it's too yellow, so I'm going to bring some of the red back in. I'm just swinging it backwards and forwards. Maybe slightly too yellow, but it's really close, so I'm going to go with that. Then I want a lighter version of it. Just do the same thing. Up to the right value. This is just the next step up, so this is my light. Slightly higher value. That's too high. Done it again. It was probably right to start with before I started bringing it up. It just goes to show, even though I've been doing this for maybe nigh on 10 years now, I still judge them wrong. Still too high. Ah. Have I gone really quiet? I think one of my mics has died. To drop the chroma of the, hang on just a second, I'm just going to put some new batteries in my radio mic because I think it's just it's died on me. The perils of live streaming. I've got two mics, so it doesn't completely go, but one is more powerful than the other. The one that's right next to me, that's pinned to me, is better. That should be hopefully back with more sound. Especially when I'm looking down at the palette, you probably won't be. Is that better? Yeah, we're up and running again. To drop the chroma of the raw umber, why yellow ochre as opposed to white? To swing it more yellow. Yes, exactly that. I want to swing it more yellow and drop the chroma at the same time. Where was I? This value is about right, I think. Oh no, it's my light I'm after. Yeah, that value is good. So I'm going to bring the value of this up with yellow ochre. So I've got a yellow version and a red version. A mix between the two. This is way too high chroma, so I'm going to bring it the rest of the way up with white. That's going to raise the value and drop the chroma. Titanium white. Value is good between the two. I've gone too yellow, but my chroma is still too high. So I want to go back red, but I need to drop chroma. So I'm going to try burnt umber, which is a red-orange, brought up to the value with white, which will drop chroma and should swing it back red as well, because it's a slightly red-orange. Bring it up to the same value. It's good. It's actually burnt umber brought up to the right value with the white is very close to the actual color. It's just slightly low chroma. Interesting. It's about the right value. Mix between these two. That's good. And for this one, burnt sienna is very close. In terms of hue, but it's slightly too high. It's too red and it's slightly too high chroma. So I'll bring in some raw umber. This will swing it more yellow. Bring it up to the right value. That's about right. Then mix between the two, and hopefully this should get me close. Yeah, that's good. In my core shadow, I'm going to go raw umber and a bit of burnt umber. I'm just going to bring it up with white because I want that to drop in chroma as well. That's probably further than I want to bring it though. That should do nicely. Okay. Okay, Judy, yeah, I'll see you again soon. Okay. So I'm going to go in with the, I'm going to rough it out first. Rough out my sphere. Now the way I always paint is I get a little bit of paint on the brush, I wipe most of it off, and then it's almost like drawing with charcoal. And I'm marking where my core shadow is going to go, roughly the same, a bit too much paint. And like this, and then I can put in my values. Nice and dark around here. My occlusion shadow in first. Nice low value there. And basically I'm following the same procedure for each of these. And there comes a point, as I was saying before, where you don't really need to look at them that closely because you know what's going to happen. And you pretty much know what the value is going to be. For the background, I'm mixing ivory black and raw umber with a little titanium white. That's how I'm finding my slightly. It's not as harsh as ivory black and white. It's not quite as bluish looking, because ivory black has a slightly ivory black is really a blue, and titanium white is slightly bluish as well. Using the same brush for most of this. And it's amazing actually how much you can get away with as long as you have a reasonably useful value balance back here. You don't have to be too exact about what they are. One thing it is good to at least suggest is that with a cast shadow it gets lighter the further away it moves from an object, and the edges get softer too. And the back edge is always quite soft. Okay, that'd be all right. I'm going to bring up the value around here a little bit because I know my core shadow is going to go there, so that would look nice. It will help it to stand out a little. I think I'm ready to paint this one now. So same thing. I'm going to go in with my core shadow first. Oh, let me have a quick look at the comments. Yeah, it is, yeah. Secret Life of Painting Spheres. And Julie says, I find this session especially useful because you're staying on the same Munsell page and mixing from multiple spheres. Technique repetition helps to solidify the method. Yes, definitely. Definitely. It's a really, really good practice, this. To stay on the same page and do a number of different spheres. It really teaches you about how to manage light and shadow. So I'll go in with my core shadow first. Now the value of the core shadow here is lower than the value of the other core shadows because the local is lower. It's if you've never done any sphere painting practice, I must say that by far the best practice I've ever done in terms of learning about value was to get, if you get a bunch of spheres, and I'll put in my reflected light, and you paint them different steps of the value scale from white down to black and a few values in between, and then do paintings of them, you learn so much about how values change across different locals. But when you come to doing something like this, it really helps. My halftone is going to be between these two. So it's basically the same, but everything is a lower value. This is going to come round into the reflected light as well. And the value spread is closer. Here's my local, so it's going to hit my local at about the same place, about up here. And it will be a little bit value where the form turns on the edge. Value will drop very slightly. And I want my main light. You see, this is following the basic form. I'm not really painting stripes, I'm painting areas. And it's a good practice to kind of work like across the form like this. Like what I found happened a lot in the workshop when we were painting apples, there was strata of colour and people were tending to try to follow the strata of colour with the brush strokes. Follow the shape of the form. It's much better. Now I want my highlight. Again, it's fairly satin. Need a little bit more titanium white. It's fairly satin still. Unfortunately, this is oil painting paper I'm painting on, and the further it travels from the light, you can see this bit here, where you can see a bit of the paper is much whiter than this bit here. So this is actually showing a little darker on the camera than I'm seeing it. So I'm not going to go in with white because it's satin. If it was very shiny, then I could go in with white. We'll kind of build up to it and then bring in the highlight. I'm looking at the sphere now, which I haven't done really up until now. Highlight is around here. You know, and it's really that easy. There comes a point where it almost feels like it's too easy, and it's almost like you're cheating, because you no longer struggle with light and shadow colors, and you can, as I was saying before, you can use this as a jumping off point. You know, this doesn't have to be how you paint. You can bring variations into this if you want to, of light and dark, slightly different hue. I wonder if I can show you quickly. So I was saying earlier on that I was going to talk about some learning I'm doing at the moment. Just adjusting these values. I think they've got a little bit out of control, a little bit too high, and neatening some edges around here. That should definitely be darker down here. So I've recently signed up for an online course myself by a very good painter. Being a good painter, of course, doesn't necessarily guarantee a good teacher, but I've only just started this course, and it's by Brian Mark Taylor, superb painter of landscapes, because I've started doing more landscape painting lately. And I picked his because the course looks really well put together, the online thing. And also because his method is, you could say, almost diametrically opposed to mine. So he doesn't worry about the hue being particularly right. He's more concerned with values, and he doesn't do the values he sees. He changes them quite a bit, which is something I've started doing myself lately as well. He works in a very, I would say, impressionist manner, with very light shadows and a lot of reflected light, overstated reflected light, but he does it extremely well, I should add. And I think it's good sometimes to be taken out of your normal ways of thinking, kind of to be challenged in a way, and also to learn something new. There we go, dark chocolate Malteser. Let me see if I can pick up this study quickly and show you that I did today. This is from one of his photos. It's like a paint-along thing. And can you see how different this is to the way that I normally work? Let me stick it up there so you can see. As I say, this is done from a photo and from a real-world object. But look at all of the hue shifts in here. The value is tightly controlled. But there's loads of different hues in here, you know. And I must admit, I kind of pulled back from some of the stuff he was doing because it just kind of looked wrong to me. But this is basically the same shape. The same things are going on. You have the core shadow and the reflected light. You have the light area and the highlight, the cast shadow. But there's a lot more, I suppose you could say, life of the hues. But to me, this, if you paint accurately like this and you paint well, it looks as strong. But I'm just running through this course at the moment. As I say, he's mainly a landscape painter. This value is much higher than it actually is. And all of these values around here, the value of the ground was much higher than it really was in the photo that he was working from. But that's a kind of an impressionist value scheme. This is like a more accurate value scheme. I must soften the edge of this cast shadow a bit. It's annoying. This core shadow is annoying me. Excuse me, need a soft edge there. Okay. So let me switch back to put the lights back on. If I put this on, hopefully you might be able to see that panel a little bit clearer now. Yeah, maybe a little bit. So I do a lot of learning with this kind of stuff too. And you can always push a little bit further. Let me actually, while I've got the camera on here, let me show you very quickly some of the value studies I've been doing lately as well. So these are done, if I can get the light right on them, entirely with a palette knife, and they are not exact values. A lot of the time I'm looking into the light, so I have to judge the values kind of by eye and guess what they are and work relationally to get a different effect. It's a different way than I normally work. It's not sight size, but it's taking me into closer to a kind of an impressionist way of painting, I think would be fair to say. So there we go. We actually didn't get to reds. I said it was going to be reds and oranges, and we only managed to do oranges. 5YR in fact, but I hope that was instructive. If you have the Munsell book, I'd strongly advise you to try some of this stuff. Even if you don't, just getting a bunch of spheres together and painting them different colours and then doing studies of them will teach you a huge amount about how light and shadow varies over form. Now, what's his name again? I'll put his name in the thing. Brian Mark Taylor. I mean, his paintings are beautiful, which is a lot of the reason why I wanted to do his online course, because I think by the time I've worked through his course, I'm trying to do it without, I'm trying to put aside all of my preconceptions and learn as he wants to teach. I won't end up painting like him, and I won't end up using all of what he teaches, because some of it, my own practice is very different. But I think by the time I come out of it, hopefully I will have a bit more depth. I'll understand a different method to the one that I'm showing you here, and if I can bring parts of the two of them together for when I'm painting outside and doing landscape, maybe some magic is going to happen. We'll see. Brian Mark Taylor, yeah, Renee, it makes sense to me that you would know his work, because you paint outside quite a bit as well. Yeah, the background hues, I mean, that is basically, missed a few comments. Yeah, working on the form of the face, Cindy, yeah. But if you can draw, I mean, if you can draw a face in value as well, and, you know, do some value spheres, also teaches you, you know, some of these. That's value 6, value of Caucasian skin, you know. Teaches you a huge amount about the value of shadows and light. If you can draw reasonably well, then you can use these colours and you will get a really nice effect. If you then want to go a little bit off-piste, and I mean, he does this stuff to, this is still wet actually, Gamsol takes a while to dry. He does this stuff to add visual interest. And I think that's something which I'm going to take away from his way of painting. So I will hopefully come out of it with everything that I know about form and about hue and how to model form and to control light with added visual interest. He also paints with a lot of texture and a lot of wash, which is something that I want to figure out how to do as well. So going off on a bit of a tangent here, but it's very interesting because his method is so different than mine. He teaches warm and cool. And you know that I'm much more a fan of talking about hue rather than warm and cool. But it's very interesting. A big bright light at the end of your long dark tunnel. Renee, that's great. That's really good to hear. I'm very glad to hear that. 5YR has tons of potential of life. Yeah, it really does. Lots of things are 5YR in the world. Lots and lots of things. I'm very glad to hear that, Romy. That's very good to hear. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now. Thanks all for watching. I will stick the replay up in the Threads Facebook group. And it's becoming a bit of a running joke, I suppose, now, but hopefully eventually I will have this stream also edited down into chapters as kind of more of a course within the Threads dashboard. Any questions that you think of about any of this at any point, just pop them in the Threads Facebook group and we'll take it from there. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you again soon.